Hello, Professor David. I'm Sabina, and you're going to witness the best group in this class. My group is consists of Chin, Tiffany, Phoenix, Wanjun, and Kaitin. Today, we bring you the differences in their negotiation styles between Taiwan and Mexico. First, we look into their historical and cultural influences on their negotiation style. Let me bring you to the history of Mexico. So Mexico started with the really ancient civilization, which is the Maya and the Aztec Empire. And the Aztec Empire was ended by the Spanish invasion. And after that, they went into war and fight for their independence, where that lead to their early republic era and was ended by a dictatorship with General Diaz. And after that, he was overturned by the revolution, and the country went into reconstruction, and that brought us the modern Mexico that we are familiar with right now. So after looking into their history, we identify four key influences. First is their indigenous heritage. Second is the Catholicism. Third is their Spanish influence. And lastly is their patriarchy characteristic. So let's look at them one by one. Okay, so the indigenous heritage, which is the Aztec and Maya civilization, they have a really strong hierarchy society. They have really complex social structures where people are identified into different layers and they have to stick to their status. And secondly is the collectivism. So these two culture both are very emphasizing on their collective cooperation, and that is very correlated with the current Mexico society, where they emphasize on community relationships and striving for harmony in conversations and avoid direct confrontation. Thirdly is symbolization. Mexico prefers nonverbal communication. This point we will touch on later even more. And fourth is ritualistic. Both Maya and Aztec Empire has a lot of different ceremonies and events where we can still see their influences until today. And lastly is the time perception. So Maya calendar, it was very widely known and actually still considered quite accurate until this time. Second, we look at the influence of Catholicism. Catholicism really emphasizes on loyalty and trust. So to incorporate this, we can see Mexico actually prefers doing business with people they know to keep it in the family, and they definitely prioritize personal relationship over legality documentations like contract. Second is it is a very high context society, so they prefer indirect communication. They prefer nonverbal cues, and they definitely emphasize on eye contact. Thirdly, we look at the Spanish influence. So Spanish influences is very family oriented, and they are very focused on work-life balance. They prefer having their own lifestyle comparing to focus on their professional career. And they also keep a really close tie with their family. And second is they have very emotional arguments. They use a lot of body language and their gesture to support their arguments and also incorporate into their daily conversations. We can see Mexico really enjoys a vibrant communication, so they also integrated a lot of humor and storytelling in their communication style. And they also love casual conversations. They use dining and casual conversations to strengthen their personal relationship as well as their professional relationship. Lastly, we look at the patriarchy influences of their negotiation style. So unfortunately, Mexico is one of the most gender inequality countries in the world, where men and masculinity is extremely valued and focus on, where men have this exaggerated performances of masculinity that stress on power and straightforwardness and emotions to show how strong they are. And it is important to keep the face of that masculinity in front of other people, or else they will definitely feel offended. which brings us the woman's status in Mexico. So unfortunately as well, that woman is expected to be submissive, to be self-denying, and to be basically less and quieter than men. So this is really ties up to how women position themselves in the Mexico society and how they communicate with people. Of course, that also applies on other women and communicating with Mexicans. So, in conclusion, Mexico is a vibrant culture that values a relationship and cherishes family, trust, cultural traditions, and their personal dignity. When you're negotiating or communicating with Mexicans, it is important to keep in mind that you build a relationship oriented approach and you use indirect communication, and you have to identify they have very different time zone. So Mexicans invented time calendar before, and they are still invented their own time. And then they are also, you have to respect their hierarchical approach. You have to find a person in charge and respect his status. And you have to have a certain sensitivity to their culture and their events. As we all know now, Mexico is still very famous and value their traditional events and ceremonies. And lastly, build trust before building contracts.
Okay, so for the next part of our presentation, I will be introducing Taiwan's culture and history and its influences on negotiation styles. So Taiwan's history is marked by a rich tapestry of influences, including periods of colonization, migration, and cultural exchange. So over the centuries, the island society has been shaped by various cultural influences coming from Portuguese, Dutch, Spanish, Qing Dynasty, Ming Dynasty, Japanese, and among others. As a result, Taiwan's culture is an eclectic mix encompassing elements from successive waves of migration and indigenous groups, giving it a unique identity that's not quite like any other place. From this unique mixture of cultures, we will highlight four main factors. From ancient Chinese culture, we have Confucianism and saving face, 面子, or 关系, relationships. From Portuguese, Dutch, and Spanish, we have some Western influences. And more recently, we also have Japanese influences from the period of Japanese colonization. To start off, I will talk a bit more about Confucianism and its effect on Taiwan's negotiation styles. Because of Confucianism, Taiwanese tend to strive for a more harmonious negotiation process, avoiding conflict and major disagreement up front. There is also a sense of hierarchy and respect, so whenever a higher level executive is present for the meeting, then it shows the other party that we place them in high respect. It's also why it's still common to start introductions with an exchange of business cards, because then you would know the participating personnel's titles. Third, ethical behavior is an important part of Confucianism, and it also translates to negotiation style of not having any underhanded tricks. And lastly, long-term relationship building is integral to Confucianism, as it will result in trust. So in negotiation, emphasis is placed more on long-term trust building rather than short-term advantages. Moving on, also stemming from influences from Chinese culture in Taiwan, saving face, 面子, or 关系, which is relationships, is extremely important during the negotiation process. So saving face means protecting and enhancing all parties' dignities. In order to do so, usually direct confrontation or straight up rejection is avoided. For example, instead of saying something like, these contract details are not acceptable, then one might say that there are still some differences that need to be hashed out before we come to an agreement. As for guanxi, which refers to relationship building, significant time is spent on building a relationship prior to any serious negotiation talks. So that could include social events such as dining out together, gift giving, or going to some shared events, for example, golfing together. Additionally, if there are mutual connections, it could also strengthen the trust between the two parties even faster. So next, I will touch on Western influence. Because of the emphasis on professional training and education for all, there is also an increase in individualism with the freedom to have one's own thoughts. This is a bit of a clash with the hierarchy culture that I mentioned on a previous slide. So in Taiwan, we see like a unique balance between hierarchical respect and individualism, leading to more open-mindedness and flexibility as each person provide their input and thoughts, but the final decision will usually still fall on upper management in the end. Due to Western influence, there's also an emphasis on formal contracts. Negotiation results usually prioritize win-win outcomes, and there is also time sensitivity in terms of efficiency that leads to faster moving decision making. Lastly, there's also more direct communication, which again is a clash with the indirect communication stemming from saving face previously. So we also think that there is a balance between the two in Taiwan's negotiation styles, finding a way to be a bit more direct with your position and thoughts while also preserving both sides' dignity and not having full on conflicts during the negotiation process. The last key factor I will touch on is Japanese colonialism. There's also time sensitivity involved in this area, but it's more in terms of punctuality rather than efficiency. There's a lot of discipline and attention to detail. Um, Similar to previous factors, there is a more structured and hierarchical negotiation style. But at the same time, it's a group oriented, a consensus building culture from Japanese colonialism. Similar to previous, they also very value politeness, which leads to more indirect communication. And also similar to before, there's a lot of emphasis placed on long term relationships and trust. So, in summary, Taiwan is a unique blend of traditional and modern values that stem from different cultures, including traditional Chinese values, Western influences, and Japanese colonialism. So, this unique blend leads to a negotiation style that is relationship oriented, direct yet polite communication, consensus building, but with individual contribution, and a strong focus on harmony and cooperation.
Hi everyone, Katia and I will be diving into a fascinating topic, the similarity and difference in business negotiation styles between Taiwan and Mexico. We will analyze this style through the lens of three key dimensions: people, process, and problem. Let's begin by looking at the people dimension, which highlights how individuals from Taiwan and Mexico engage during negotiation. Both Taiwan and Mexico share a relationship-focused approach. In both cultures, building trust and personal connection is a priority in business negotiation. Another similarity is their use of indirect communication styles. Both cultures aim to maintain harmony and avoid confrontation through subtle and nuanced communication. However, there are key differences. In Taiwan, emotions during negotiation are often concealed to maintain a professional demeanor, while in Mexico, people tend to openly express their emotion, making their communication more dynamic. Body language also differs significantly. Taiwanese negotiators tend to be more reserved, while Mexican negotiators are typically livelier and more expressive. Now that we understand the people aspect, let's move on to the process dimension.
Now let's talk about the process dimension and the similarities between Taiwan and Mexico. The first one is respect hierarchy. So Taiwan and Mexico businesses in the majority tend to be more hierarchical. And negotiations often involve a chain of figures that in turn show the importance of the deals. And status and titles are respected in both countries. The second similarity is the pace of negotiations. So both cultures often proceed at a slower pace because they want to prioritizing the development of trust and mutual understanding over rushing any decisions. The difference in the process dimension, the first one is negotiation style. So for Taiwanese negotiators, they often follow a more rigid schedule and rules while negotiating. However, Mexican negotiators are much more flexible and spontaneous, and they might jump back and forth between different topics without following a strict sequential orders. So this kind of style might confuse other negotiators. The second difference is gift giving. So this practice is deeply embedded in Taiwanese business culture, and small and symbolic gifts often represent the goodwill of the company. But for Mexican, this is not very as embedded in their business culture. However, it is still welcoming. The third differences is flexibility of agenda. So for Taiwanese meeting, though of course open to adjustment, are generally more structured and business focused. But for Mexican meetings, they might not follow a very rigid agenda, and the discussion often flow more organically and often incorporating personal topics. The fourth differences is emotional engagement. And for Taiwanese negotiator, because the emotion are often more restrained, and that reflect the Confucian value of harmony and self-control. But for Mexican negotiator, they often show more passion, and they often express more openly of their emotion, as they view that as a sign of showing the commitment. And the third dimension is problem. For Taiwan and Mexico, the similarity, first one is long-term benefits. So both countries leans towards more collectivistic societies and aim to ensure long-term benefits. So building bigger relationship often takes time and effort. So finding common grounds and avoiding harming the relationship are important negotiation goals for both countries. And the second similarity is maintain harmony. So both cultures avoid direct confrontation to maintain harmony and mutual respect. And for indirect communication is preferred when addressing disagreements or other sensitive issues. The difference in the problem dimension between Taiwan and Mexico is the attitudes towards contracts. So for Taiwanese negotiator, detailed and precise contracts are very important. For the Mexican negotiator, of course, contract is also important, but they value more of the relationship. So for them, a contract might not always be honored. So it is very important to continue to cultivate the relationship and remain flexible when negotiation with Mexican negotiators.
So the third question, if your clients in one of them will invest in the other and need to negotiate a lot with the government and the businessmen in that country soon, what are your recommendations to them? First off, I would like to give a recap for the general cultural differences between Mexico and Taiwan. And the first thing is Mexico is a high context communication country. So the culture often relies on nonverbal cues and implied meanings. And Taiwanese entrepreneurs should avoid overly direct or explicit communication because it may come across as rude or uncomfortable to your Mexico counterpart. And Mexico is a culture with polychronic time orientation. Time is perceived more flexible in Mexico, so meetings and deadlines might not be as rigid as in Taiwan. That means if you're set at a meeting at 9 o'clock, your counterpart may show up at 9:30 or even to 10:30. So be more patient and understanding the relaxed approach to time. And particularism over universalism. Mexicans often prioritize relationships and context over the universal rules. So be prepared for the flexibility in applying regulations or agreements, especially when personal connections is going to influence the decisions. So here are some advice that we offered to those who want to do a business in Mexico, and this is the advice specifically to the government side. So first of all is understand the local bureaucracy. And Mexican government processes can be complex and may involve extensive paperwork. So it is crucial to understand the local legal and administration's requirements, or you just hire a local consultant. It will be easier. And the second thing is the engagement. We try to engage with the local officials. And like I mentioned earlier, the connection actually works. So develop the good connection with local government representatives. And in that means you're going to build trust and maintaining a frequent communication that will facilitate a smoother process and a smoother approval or negotiations. And then the third thing is about the banking system. In Taiwan, we don't really need to pay a deposit tax when it comes to you try to put money in the bank. But in Mexico, there's a 3% deposit tax you have to pay. And that is something you need to put consideration when it comes to your financial planning and your operational budgeting. And the fourth one is longer process. As I mentioned earlier, they are polychronic about the time. So and administrative processes with the government will typically take 30 to 60 days. So patience and be planning advance is essential to you whatever you're planning your strategies. And then the advice for the business side. And we keep repeating that personal relationship is very important. So Mexicans often prefer to do business with people they know and they trust. So spend some more time hanging out with your counterpart. It's actually beneficial to create a bonding. And effective culture. Um, Mexicans openly displays emotions in business settings, meaning to say, you have to showing enthusiasm and a warm welcome can enhance the interaction, and just avoid appearing too neutral or reserved when it comes to meeting or you meet that person in person. So that might offer a false projection to your attitude to your counterpart in Mexico. And be flexible in negotiations. And business discussion might include long and informal conversations before the decisions will eventually made. So flexibility and a willingness to adopt will help navigate this process effectively. And last thing is, if trying to establish a company there, try to increase the salaries because the average salary they're having monthly is USD 420. So that is relatively lower than in Taiwan. So a higher salary level can increase your employees' motivation when it comes to stay longer in your company or to the productivity. So let's move on to Phoenix.
Okay, thanks Chin's introduction the Taiwan to go to Mexico side. And on contrast side, today I will go through the Mexico to Taiwan co-work with government first. So first part is formality of the process. In Taiwan, government agency always require formal administrative procedure and process, such as the submission of the formal proposal, agreement, or report and the adherence to relevant administrative procedure and timelines. Compared to Mexico, government agency in Taiwan general more procedural and more attention to the detail. And next one, communication style. In Taiwan government culture, we always use formal tune and polite in talking and also writing context in classical Chinese. Need to pay attention to the tone that we need to choose the language when we communicating to others in government that we need to must be have very humble and polite way. The third one, regulation and norms. Taiwan has clear law and norm to guide the operation of government department. So including contract sign used for public fund and also government procurement. Mexican business or individual who wish to cooperate with Taiwanese government must understand and follow these legal provisions. The first one, time concept and work tempo. Taiwanese people usually pay a lot of attention to time and planning punctually. In the process of cooperation, it's very important to submit a document in timely manner, and we must need to hand in all the document before the deadline. And next part is the Mexico to Taiwan co-work with business side. First one, humility and courtesy is the most important, I think, because it's very important in Taiwan that Taiwanese always be very humble, that need to pay attention to maintain indirect, not too over direct or self-promoting tones, showing the respect and patience, and expertise during meeting and negotiation will lead to a better relationship. The second one, teamwork and conscious. Taiwan co-work culture often value teamwork, and many decision-make process require brainstorming during the meeting. This is a contrast to some centralized decision-make models in some Mexican companies. Therefore, when working with Taiwanese company, it may take more time for consolidation and joint decision together. The third, contract and written agreement. In Taiwan, business cooperation usually require detailed and very in detail and need to written contract covering the right and responsibility of all parties. Taiwan business contract have a very strong focus on the specific term and the deadline and also the responsibility who need to take. So which may differ from Mexico's more verbal or flexible business style. Therefore, Mexican companies need to prepare to review and finalize when they sign the contract. The fourth, the pace of meeting and discussion. Business meeting in Taiwan tend to be very formal and detailed. When discussing cooperation options, Taiwanese company need to ask everyone to provide data and the report to show the evidence. Therefore, Mexican company need to prepare more sufficient data that to appreciate or support the present and let the co-work schedule more clear. So that's all my part, the difference between Mexico and Taiwan. Thank you.